Hi you guys, I'm back with another video about Men. I mean Men the movie, of course. And if you guys are wondering why I'm making another video about Men, it's because I realized that I think this movie deserves a spoiler review, but also I had a request for a spoiler review, and to be fair, the last video I made about it, I had to film very quickly because I only had about 15 to 20 minutes to film it, and so I couldn't really go too in-depth. I think that this movie deserves a little bit more depth, so alas, you guys are getting a spoiler review. If you haven't seen the movie yet, you could still watch my spoiler-free video on it, and I'll link that down below. So let's go ahead and go through the basics again. This is an Alex Garland movie, and I'll read the synopsis again just for old time's sake. So in the aftermath of a personal tragedy, Harper retreats alone to the beautiful English countryside, hoping to find a place to heal. However, someone or something from the surrounding woods appears to be stalking her. What begins as simmering dread soon becomes a fully formed nightmare inhabited by her darkest memories and fears, and of course it's distributed by A24. So right off the bat, there is a couple things about this movie that are a little bit odd and strange, and one of the things is that most of the men in the movie are played by Rory Kinnear, so we don't have a very big cast. We have our main girl Harper, and then we have all the men, which are all Rory Kinnear, and then we have the ex-husband, who's the only man who isn't played by him, and he only appears obviously in flashbacks. And we also have the best friend, so Harper's best friend, that she's often seen FaceTiming throughout the film. So it's a really small cast, which makes everything feel a little bit more secluded, kind of like how Harper is pretty secluded in this English countryside. So that's the first weird thing. The second weird thing about the movie is that there isn't a whole lot of dialogue happening, or as much as I would want there to be. My favorite moments in the film are the moments between Harper and her friend. What's her friend's name? I should look her up because her friend's name is Riley. So I really enjoy the moments where Harper is FaceTiming Riley and talking to her, because those felt like genuine friendship moments that I wanted to know more about, and it felt like these characters actually were close friends and had a genuine connection. So I did enjoy that, and I kind of wish that her friend Riley was present more throughout the film, or that more happened in the end, where maybe Riley would have, I mean, she did come in the end, but I wish maybe she would have come earlier or something like that. It kind of reminds me of the movie The Night House, where you have the best friend, I forgot her name in that film too, and she's pretty involved throughout the film. And I kind of wanted the same with this best friend. I wanted her to be more involved, because it seemed like she was a big part of Harper's life, and it seemed like she was a big part of helping Harper get through her grief also. The other big moments of actual dialogue that we get are between Harper and her ex-husband James, which we see via flashbacks. And so these were also pretty interesting too. Harper's interactions with her best friend and also the interactions with her ex-husband are the only more developing moments for her character in the movie, and areas where we actually could see what type of person Harper might be, whereas in the rest of the movie she is honestly pretty quiet. And I was even watching a review, because I wasn't planning on making another video about Men, and I like to watch my reviews after I make my review, but unfortunately I'd already watched Possessed by Horror's, Sarah's review on it. If you don't watch Possessed by Horror, she's great, and you should probably check her out. But Sarah made a review with her boyfriend about this movie, and she did mention one thing that I didn't think of, and now that she mentioned it, I completely agree, and that is that Harper kind of just stands there and watches a lot of the things that happen, which becomes kind of annoying throughout the film and makes her character fall a little bit into the background. And as Sarah put it, she kind of fell into the audience herself, she was a part of the audience and she wasn't really doing anything. We were kind of just watching Rory's portrayal of the men. I don't know, it became really weird. And since I told you guys that some of my favorite parts were the interactions between Harper and the people in her life, when that sort of dropped off towards the middle, end of the movie, I became a little less interested in the story as well. So we will get to talking about the actual men in this movie, and by that I mean all the Rory Kinnear characters. But first I just want to finish talking about Harper and her story, which feels almost separate from the story of the men, if that makes any sense. But I was just disappointed in how Harper's character development kind of just fell flat. And especially in the end, how her ex-husband becomes, rebirthed by all the other men, and he kind of sits next to her, and I'm expecting us to get at least a scene of her just destroying him, kind of as a symbol of her finally eradicating her guilt, or you know, like not letting her grief take control of her life anymore. And to be honest, I can't remember how long after this tragedy it's supposed to be. The way the film is set up, it almost seems like it just happened, like it was really recent. So in the Babadook, it makes a little bit more sense. If you haven't seen the Babadook, just, you know, skip ahead maybe like 30 seconds. But in the Babadook, it makes a bit more sense because it's been quite a few years and she finally is able to get through and put her grief at bay and kind of like keep the monster down in the basement, you know. And in this movie, I can't tell how long ago this tragedy happened and how she is supposed to really like stop her grief or put her grief at bay, but maybe in the end it was more not the grief but more the guilt that she was trying to put at bay, since she felt like she was responsible for her husband's suicide, which even the audience doesn't know if it was an accident or actually a suicide. So even though the movie does feel a bit like it's about grief, like the Babadook for example, it also feels a lot like it's mostly about guilt, because she feels so much guilt, like she is responsible for the death of her ex-husband, who it seems like she was trying to separate with anyways before it happened. So it seems more like, rather than missing him or feeling that sort of grief, it was more the guilt that was taking over and controlling her life. This is sort of symbolized at the end when he sits next to her on the couch after the rebirth and he is making her feel guilty again, kind of like showing that he's always going to be haunting her, and she reaches for the axe, but we never actually get to see her like take any action. We'll talk about the birth too, you guys. We'll talk about the birth. But I did want to mention also that another thing I really liked about the movie was just the cinematography and the score. I think I mentioned that in my other video review, so I still recommend people to go see it. Like, I want people to go see this movie because I think it's still worth a watch, even if in the end it falls kind of flat and makes no sense whatsoever. But I think that the actual movie was really good up to a certain point. Like, I was enjoying all the creepy things. It was sufficiently suspenseful when it needed to be, creepy when it needed to be, interesting when it needed to be, and then it all sort of fell into this weird body horror that didn't fit the movie at all in the end. But some of the scenes actually did send chills down my spine, like when she's in the tunnel and the man starts running after her, and then when she's being stalked by the naked green man. That is so creepy. Again, in the church, there are some very almost like intense scores, and we get a side-by-side play of her flashbacks while she's also in the church, and that was very, very creepy as well. So I do think that this movie knows how to be creepy and hit the right notes, but again, the story just took a really weird direction. And I'm not sure if maybe Alex Garland just had this idea of men rebirthing each other or birthing each other over and over again in a weird cycle, and then he wanted to build a movie around that. Or I'm not sure if these were two separate ideas that he had, and then he decided to just combine them into one movie. And I'm just kind of disappointed by that part. I'll be honest with you guys. When I saw this birthing scene, I was just sitting there like, why? Like, just why? I just want to know why, you know? And it never was actually explained why. And I think that that scene is going to stop me from wanting to watch this movie again, or I might just fast forward through it because honestly it was disgusting and I don't want to see it again. Like, I had to watch it because I was in the theater, but I don't need to see it again. It went on for a long time and kept showing you everything graphically over and over again. You have to keep in mind that Harper's just kind of standing there on the side watching at this point, and so was I, you know? The body horror, don't get me wrong, it's really well done, it's not cheesy, it's very gross and horrible to look at, so I think that they really wanted to show off this part of the movie, like, look what we were able to create. But at the same time, it takes away from the story and distracts us from the story and Harper, and really, I just wanted to know more about Harper at this point. I didn't understand how these men connected to her own grief, her own guilt. So let's just talk about the men, who are of course all played by the same actor. We have the person she is renting from, who seems friendly enough, but maybe just says a few odd things here and there that makes the audience feel a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe Harper feels a little bit uncomfortable at times. And then we've got the police officer, who isn't really very much of a help at all, kind of like dismissive of her. We've got some of these creepy men in the bar. Maybe they're just sort of sitting there staring at her funny, and one of them kind of like runs after her at one point and tries to get into her house. There is the weird man-child who's like a CGI, same actor, but CGIing the face onto the body of like a younger child, not like a really young child, but maybe like a teenager. That was really weird. like a young teenager. It was really weird. That part was creepy. I don't know if it was a joke, like were they just trying to say that he's supposed to be a man-child, because that's pretty funny, but it also was just really creepy, and he's wearing this weird Marilyn Monroe mask a lot of the times, and I don't understand why. Then of course we have the priest, the worst offender of all of these men. He is just so creepy and rude from the beginning when he's supposed to be helping Harper through her grief, and she tries to confide in him, and then he sort of just blames her. So he's just terrible. Later, I thought he was just going to straight up her. I'm so glad that didn't happen in the movie. I would have been very unhappy with this movie if they went to that length. But instead, it just implies that he is angry about her being a woman. Like, he's just angry at her for being a woman. He goes on a rant. She doesn't really say anything. And then he's going to start to like assault her or something, and she kind of just like stabs him and pushes him off. His character was just the worst. He might have even been a little bit over the top and unnecessary, to be totally honest. And finally we have the weird spiritual green man who seems like some type of fertility god, and we never really get much of a backstory on him when I think a backstory would have been more necessary, because he's kind of creepy and he just sort of like follows her out of the woods and hangs out naked around her house. The police come and detain him, and apparently they let him free after determining that he is pretty innocent and harmless, I guess. But over the course of the movie, he eventually gives birth to all these other men, including her ex-husband. So it seems like there's some type of spiritual, like supernatural connection he has to Harper in a weird way, and it's never really explained why or where he comes from. It seems like whatever it is, it has to do a little bit with the church, but it's never really completely woven into the story. Harper never really is able to discover anything about it for herself. I thought maybe she would end up doing some research or finding out some information, but since she doesn't do anything really in this movie, that never comes to fruition. We never find out much about this naked green man, except that apparently he's some type of fertility god that can birth other men, and that was essentially his only purpose in the movie. So another confusing part about this movie is that multiple men played by the same actor appear at the same time. So the point of the movie isn't that every man is actually just the same, and that maybe they are kind of like some weird deity that transforms into different looks, like some type of shapeshifter. I thought that was maybe the case, but then looking back on it, I remember multiple men being present at the same time, which just makes everything more confusing. So this entire English countryside is pretty much possessed by this weird deity or fertility god creature that perhaps causes this illusion around Harper that has to do with her fears and her past guilt, and then maybe his purpose is to, I don't even know. His purpose wasn't to kill her, because even though a lot of the men tried to kill her, she never really defends herself or does anything about it. And then they kind of just take care of themselves by birthing each other, and each one kind of dies as they give birth to the next one. And finally the ex-husband comes out. So they kind of just take care of themselves, you know? They do try to harm her, but they don't try very hard. One thing I really did like, though, is when the knife is pulled through the hand and it replicates the injuries of the ex-husband and the broken ankle. Like, that was a really cool way for them to portray the grief and how this connects to her past trauma. Like, it was one of the only things that really connected all of these happenings to her past trauma, and I found that to be very interesting. I liked that aspect of it. I thought that it looked cool. The hand was just like, oh, the body horror of that was so creepy. So what's left to talk about now? I think just the ending. After the rebirth, and when it is alluded to that Harper axes the ex-husband once and for all, but we're not seeing any of that because it doesn't show it on the screen, then Harper is sitting outside very peacefully afterwards, and Riley shows up, her best friend, and Riley turns out to be pregnant, which, by the way, why? Why? Like, what was the purpose of connecting that? There was no reason. There was no reason. So for the first time in a while, we get to see Harper smile, and we really only see her truly smile when she's either alone enjoying the peaceful nature and the countryside, or when she's talking to her friend Riley. And then, of course, the female police officer, which I failed to mention earlier because she had such a small part, but I guess she was one of the only other people in the cast also. And she seems more relaxed and comfortable with her as well. which kind of just points to the fact that Harper is only comfortable around women in this movie, understandably so, because all of the men are the creepy Rory Kinnear creature. And I did like that ending scene where Harper just sort of smiles at her and she is finally at peace with herself. But again, it doesn't explain how any of these other parts of the movie connect to Harper's personal journey or what the purpose of this was. We don't get much lore behind this green man, which I think I would like to have more lore behind him because he is a very interesting character. I did also mention this in my previous video, but I find it pretty funny that all of the moments when Harper is enjoying herself or at peace or relaxing, the men in the movie come and have to ruin the moment, and it's pretty funny that that happens, and that's one of my favorite parts of the movie because that honestly made me laugh as it happened every time she's enjoying a moment. Okay, I think that's it, you guys. I feel like I just got so much off my chest talking about this. I hope this is a satisfying spoiler review, and I want to know your guys' thoughts on this movie. I still don't know what to rate it. I'm falling between like a 3 and a 3.5 at this point because even though I enjoyed a lot of the movie, it was so confusing and just disjointed at the end that I'm not really sure I could give it a higher score since nothing was really explained and there wasn't much that happened in the story, unfortunately, once the body horror aspect took over the movie. And that's really unfortunate because I was interested in Harper's personal journey. I'm not really sure I'd want to rewatch this movie, but they really did have something going for a while. Like, the story was interesting, there were so many creepy points, you wanted to know more, you wanted to know what direction it was headed in. It's just really a shame that nothing really kind of concluded in a manner that made sense or that connected in the end, because it could have been a lot better. And even if they had just shown Harper somehow defeating her past guilt in a more physical way, then we would have at least been able to feel the same relief that her character does at the end, but we can't really, and that's the sad part, you know? So I'm somebody who advocates for men too. Let's improve on the last men. Let's go into this green man's backstory and the lore behind him. Let's have him go after another woman in grief or suffering at the hands of a man. I mean, come on, we could make this story a million different times in a million different ways. Maybe this green man can become a new horror icon. What do you guys think about that? I think that would be a good idea. I'm gonna stop talking now because my camera recording time says I've been recording for over 30 minutes. And I think this is going to be enough footage to make a video. So thank you guys for watching. And let me know what you think I should do next on this channel, what movie I should watch and review next. Let me know your thoughts on Men, mark your spoilers, and if you haven't seen it and you watched this video, I mean, you kind of got the gist of it, but I still think you should probably go watch it because even though I didn't love it, I definitely would recommend it as it's weird enough that you kind of have to experience it for yourself. And I don't think I mentioned this, but the movie is also well acted and doesn't feel cheesy. So it doesn't have any of those like technical issues. The issues fall more in the story and kind of like being able to connect everything, if that makes sense. Okay, you guys, thanks so much for watching today's video. I will see you in the next one. Bye!